welcome to GraftCast, the show where we talk to entrepreneurs and business owners about their professional and entrepreneurial journeys. Today we've got Dr. Ali Khan on the show. From being a surgeon and having his own surgery in Ireland all the way through to having an investment fund and now acting, Ali shows us how he structured his life to fulfill his passion now in being an actor. This is a great episode. Enjoy. So, Dr. Ali Khan, welcome to GraftCast. Have you always been entrepreneurial?
Hugo, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks very much for having me. Yes, is the short answer. Yes, I have. Ever since I was a kid, I've always been creative. I've always been artistic. I've always been fascinated by, I suppose you'd call them entrepreneurs now, but back, I suppose in history, you might call them polymaths, people like Leonardo da Vinci, people like Ibn Sina, people who I suppose have had a core passion, a core focus, and have basically built a body of work and built an empire around that focus. I think for me, the core passion, the core focus has always been the acting and being a creative and being an artist. And everything I've built out, or the entire empire I've built around that, is very much focused on platforming that and taking that to the next level and building an empire around the acting and being a creative and having that empire reach as far as possible to as many people as possible. And for that to induce transcendence and a sense of elevation in people when they touch into it. So perhaps would it be helpful if I gave you a little bit of intro to my background?
Yeah, into your background, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. So for me, I'm an actor primarily. I used to be a surgeon, and I also run an investment fund. So the way all of that came about is I've been acting since I was a kid. And then when I was in secondary school, I went to a beautiful, wonderful school in Cork called Presentation Brothers College, Cork. And the magnificent thing about that school, I think, is that it very much had an ethos of creativity and allowing people to find their creativity and find their creative niche in whatever way was best for them. So it really was a brilliant environment for finding your passion. And in that school, it was when I was in fifth year, I got the opportunity to do a wonderful play with a magnificent teacher in the school who's still a mentor of mine, Kieran Ahern. And Kieran will love hearing this because he'll be sitting down in West Cork just having a cup of tea, looking out over the ocean, and he'll love to hear his name mentioned. So Kieran, shout out to you. And Kieran was a professional actor, or is a professional actor, acted in Broadway and the West End and in film and on TV. And he's just an incredible mind around acting, an incredible creative. And Kieran cast me in this show called Philadelphia, Here I Come. And we were very fortunate in Prez to have this beautiful theatre set up with lighting rigs and sound box and all of the things you'd need to put on a really professional quality show. Once I did that show, I was absolutely hooked into the acting. I was like, what is this? This is the most amazing feeling I've ever had. This is the most amazing experience I've ever had. It's just stunning. And I was totally hooked in on crowd psychology in terms of being able to work with crowds, feel their emotion, induce emotions in them, elevate them to the next level, induce inspiration, feed off that creation of characters, losing myself in a character. I was one of the co-leads in the play, and so it was such an amazing opportunity. So then what I went from there is I kind of basically put in place the structures to allow myself to do what I do now as a young 34-year-old actor, is I put in place the structures to focus on my passion. And so I trained as a surgeon. I trained in University College Cork. I did a thing called the MFDS from the Royal College of Surgeons in Edinburgh. I did an oral and maxillofacial surgery residency in Cambridge University Hospitals. And then I did a pediatric dental residency in Children's Hospital Ireland, Crumlin. I then set up my own practice in Dublin, and thankfully that went very successfully. And then concurrent to having my own practice in Dublin and being self-employed in private practice, I did an executive MBA at Trinity College in Dublin. And then I sold my practice, moved to Oxford and did a master's and MSc in global governance and diplomacy at the University of Oxford. And then I set up an investment fund. And the investment fund was a real manifestation of creativity because it was based on an algorithm and an associated investment strategy that I designed, because I was very much focused on the idea of governing dynamics, the sort of first principles by which we govern the universe. And that's something that I bring into my acting style as well, in terms of finding the transcendence, looking at sort of taking a step back and looking at how everything operates and can you sort of pull those strings. And it was really interesting. I still remember where I was. I was in U169 in the Bodleian Library, and I was looking out the window at the Radcliffe camera, and I'll never forget it. There was a single piece of the algorithm that hadn't quite landed in my head, and I'm quite a visual thinker. And suddenly, on the stained glass windows of the Bodleian Library, I saw the algorithm come to life and dance all along the screen, all along the glass, as it were. And it was just one of the most transcendent and beautiful moments of my life. And once I saw that and once I saw it come to life, I was like, perfect, that's it. That was the last piece I needed. I set up the fund shortly afterwards, and it's been absolutely flying ever since. So the surgery and the investment fund kind of helped me put in place the structures to do what I do now, which is focus on the acting. And my vision with the acting is I've been fortunate, thanks to my association with the university and all the wonderful production companies that work with it, that are sort of that shoot off the university, to have done a multitude of beautiful, wonderful shows, stage shows here, and I've done like some like film and TV work as well. But I'm keen to do more film work and more TV work, and the vision is hopefully in the next couple of years is to go to Hollywood and make films. And I think more broadly, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in a second, more broadly, what I'm trying to do is build a creative empire, as it were, very much focused on, very much primarily focused on the acting and all the outputs that come with that, but also on just anyone who gets in touch with Ali Khan's acting empire, creative empire, will feel that sense of transcendence, that sense of inspiration as a result.
Brilliant. So basically, from what I've just heard, you have sort of the ability to spin quite a few plates at the same time.
Yeah.
Is there anybody sort of in your family that have also been entrepreneurial and have the ability to do that? Has that been passed down at all?
I suppose in terms of inspiration, and the idea, I think I would look to history a lot, actually, probably for people who I find creative across a number of fields. And I think for me, the thing I always found fascinating is that for me, the primary goal here is being the best actor I can possibly be, and and I'll go into this in a second, like the work I've done around the craft of acting. That's the number one focus for me. Everything else feeds that.
Yeah.
So the surgery fed that, the investment fund feeds that, the books I write, the I suppose the podcast I do, any kind of creative work that I engage in feeds into this higher purpose around the acting. And I think is many ways the secret to spinning all those plates, is being able to have a primary focus that you're trying to forge, and then have everything sort of feed into that. And so I think for me now, for example, with the investment fund, there was a stage where there was a huge amount of my time taken up in terms of putting the work in to kind of build up the fund and to build up the organization around the fund. And I suppose now it's at the stage where it only requires an hour or two of my time, because I've built the algorithm, I built the structures, I built the organizational organizational structures, and built the fund up to place. Thankfully, it started from quite a high base, and then I built it to a base now where it kind of just operates itself. So you create this beautiful, and we live in an era now, thankfully, where we have technologies that facilitate us being able to sort of put in place these wonderful machines that tick away as you're recording podcasts, and like, or when you're on stage. And so I had the opportunity when I was forging that to go to Stockholm. I went out to Stockholm. This wonderful venture capital fund invested in me and invested in my fund, and they didn't want any equity. They simply said, "You seem to be crushing this with this fund. You seem to be doing really, really well. would you fancy coming out and taking part in an accelerator program? Now, you can inspire others on the program. You seem to have a good handle on your business, so I don't know if you're necessarily going to, you know, it not necessarily as much for you, but more for you to help others as well. Um, would you fancy coming out? And I said, yeah, sure. So I went to live in Stockholm right kind of between, I I finished my master's in Oxford Uni in 2022, and for the kind of intermittent 2 years before I moved back to Oxford to take the acting to the next level, I lived between Ireland and Stockholm. And so living out in Stockholm was fabulous in terms of you learn a whole new way of life. You learn what I think the biggest thing I gleaned from that experience, which was fantastic in terms of building the fund up to the next level, but also I learned the idea of elegant aestheticism as a creative. So this idea of elegant, precise, detailed execution, but doing it in a way that's aesthetic and creative and beautiful. So it's kind of that marriage of aestheticism with elegance and being able to just be precise in your execution. And that's something I brought back here. So I moved back to Oxford in 2024. And that was really interesting for me because I was trying to take my acting to the next level. And so I kind of built all these structures, and now I'm back here. And I can't tell you how much Oxford Uni was a positive impact on my life. As I often say, I took the kind of Oscar Wilde path of going from Trinity College Dublin to Oxford University. And I think there's something in that path, you know, because there's beautiful creativity and artistic expansiveness in both of those universities. And the reason I studied in both of those universities and wanted to was a combination of the content of what I was learning in terms of helping me with the fund and helping me with my life, but also the universities themselves. And you get this, between both of the universities, you get this wonderful opportunity to be creative. And also I was keen to kind of take myself to the next level in all facets of my life, and had the opportunity and continue to have the opportunity here at Oxford Uni to just expand infinitely as a person. And I think that's been really, really wonderful. And it's beautiful because at the moment I'm doing tons of shows, tons of plays. I'm in the process of trying to get an agent to try and do more film and TV and more plays down in London as well. As London's obviously very close by. So if there are any agents listening, AL_KHAN91 is my Instagram.
Let's get him on the podcast as well. That'd be
get
great.
him on the pod. Yeah. I'm sure we can share out my my details afterwards if anybody wants to connect. And that's kind of the vision. So I'm doing a lot of plays, and fortunate that through the university get to do loads of really high quality productions, and keen to do more like film and TV.
Yeah.
And eventually, hopefully, go to Hollywood and make films.
Am I right by saying basically, with the as a surgeon, that funded the right to start the investment fund, and those two from there, which is an investment fund that now funds the acting dream, basically. Is that am I right by saying that?
Yeah,
essentially,
pretty accurate. Yeah, like I mean, thankfully, I created quite a strong financial base of myself through my work as a surgeon and being self-employed in private practice and building up, a very successful practice. And then with the investment fund, the same way, then I was able to sort of take a lot of the capital and be able to put that into the fund, and then be able to build out the fund in a very, I suppose, proficient way using the algorithm, and using the investment strategy. And now, I suppose it started from, I suppose I won't go into specific figures. I won't bore you with them, but like it goes, it started from a multi 7-figure base and has grown exponentially since that.
Yeah.
So we're sort of we're sort of in a great time of expansiveness with the fund, and it's been I think what's been very rewarding about it is that, listen, the fact that it's going gangbusters, profitability wise, is fantastic, right? Of course it is. And the financial freedom that it affords me as an individual is brilliant. But to be honest with you, Hugo, like a lot of it is actually just the capacity and the fact that I created something from scratch, and it it walks
Mm.
and it runs and it sprints, and it's continuing to sprint, and it's sprinting now as we're talking. And it's like, I think that the satisfaction I get as a creative when I create something, and it's the same satisfaction I get, when I'm on stage and I create a character, or if I'm on set and I create a character in front of the lens. It's like you get to, I suppose, forge something from scratch, and then to see that come to life, and to see that, I suppose, breathe and fly, and see people interact with it, is just so rewarding as a creative. And I think from my perspective, that has been a hugely, hugely rewarding thing with the investment fund, is to say that, like, an idea that I came up with in the libraries and the campuses of Trinity College Dublin and Oxford University, and something that danced on the glass in the Bodleian, now dancing in the markets and going well, is
Yeah.
fantastic. And I suppose the core thesis of the fund is very much focused on the idea of sustainability, equaling profitability, and this wider idea that, like, finance and capital can be a force for good, and can actually create positivity and create, I suppose, positive impact in the world, but can also be profitable.
Yeah.
And I'm a big believer in that, and I'm a big believer in, if I look at a lot of different things in the world that I care about, causes that I care about, geopolitical causes, etc., and I look at them and I think to myself, you know what? So much of what's going to make the difference here is whether you can pull the financial strings in the right way. And of course, these things are complex, right? Everything's complex, but I think oftentimes it does come back to capital allocation, and especially a deep focus of my study, both during my master's at Trinity College in Dublin and at Oxford University, was around governing dynamics. And it became so evident to me that, like, when you look at multiple structures across geopolitics, finance, art, creativity, etc., finance and capital allocation becomes so important. And so, like, for example, a big thing I'm focusing in on at the moment is private equity investing and supporting companies around the world. So I was born in Ireland, as you can probably tell from the upward lilt, the glorious lilt in my voice. But my parents are from Pakistan, and I suppose that sort of broader awareness of multiple cultures and multiple markets and places in the world gives me a very interesting opportunity as an investor. I also am very fortunate to be able to speak like 10 languages.
Wow.
So that really helps me as an individual to be able to relate to people around the world. And so a big focus I'm doing at the moment is I'm investing in companies that otherwise might not have capital, might not get access to the capital that I have, and investing in emerging markets, and trying to give opportunities to really fabulous ideas that, and I've had loads of really great successes with, companies that I've, invested in, and then they've, gotten to a point with liquidity events, and yielded great profitability and great ideas. And I suppose for me, to kind of touch on it as an artist, and to really, like, focus in on that for a second in terms of being an entrepreneur. As an actor, the thing I really want to give to the world is a really interesting offering of creativity. And I've written a book about acting technique that I use primarily to help myself at the moment, but something I would like to publish someday. And it's focused on the idea of transcendence, and trying to induce transcendence with your performance as an actor, and trying to induce inspiration in people, and trying to play with, I suppose, play on the level of a higher level when you're sort of on a stage or on a film set. And how do you go about doing that? And so I think for me as a creative, I find definitely it's about finding the higher ideal of a piece, but then it's also about the aestheticism, and, like, what are the images that you're creating? What is the character you're embodying? And so much of it, Hugo, is about connection. And that goes back to the thing that I'm very excited about as I sort of build out my own creative empire, my own acting empire, is the capacity to connect with as many people as I possibly can, and find ways to really touch them on a level that's really speaking to their higher light as individuals, and trying to sort of induce that transcendence and induce that inspiration in them with my performance, and with anytime I want it to be where anytime they engage with Ali, the Ali Khan acting empire, or Ali Khan creative empire, that they're touched in some way that helps elevate them. Because I'm a big believer in the idea of light, and that we all have a sort of a beautiful, magnificent light within ourselves, and trying to help each other find the best way that light can shine, I think is so important as an entrepreneur, just as a person, whatever you're offering out to the world, you know? And so I think for me, when I focus on being a creative, that's what I'm building. So whether it's, you know, as an actor, that's the primary thing, you know, offering out films. As I said, I'd love to go to Hollywood. That's the plan in the next couple of years, is to go out there and make films, but also make TV, make beautiful stage work and plays, and be, as an actor, just create a body of work that people can really touch into. But also, I'm keen to make a production company to get it on the side of actually making films, not just acting in them. I write books. I wrote a couple of children's books, one for mid-teens, one for younger kids. The younger one for younger kids is called Balial, and the one for mid-teens is called The Annals of Merton. And then I wrote the book about acting, a book about poetry and philosophical essays. I'm keen to kind of get into music more, and sort of, you know, whether it's DJing or also playing a bunch of instruments like the guitar and the piano and the saxophone, which I all play. And I suppose, like, all of that, and the podcasting as well,
Yeah,
of course.
I was going to ask about the podcast.
Yeah, all of that is in service of this higher idea of sort of creating an empire of creativity for people to tap into, but all in service of the acting. And I think that's really what I'm trying to do, is build something that people can really connect with and get empowered and lifted up through.
And with the podcasting, why do you think it's such a fantastic medium for people to market themselves and advertise, basically?
So my podcast is called Things That Move Me. That was a shameless plug, I know, but it's my podcast. I suppose the thing about it, Hugo, is for me it was all about the idea of inspiration. What are the ways in which we find inspiration? And it kind of taps into my wider ethos as a I suppose an artist who's trying to induce transcendence. Is people find inspiration in so many things, right? Like we talked about rugby, because you know you're a fabulous rugby player, and I used to.
My mates are going to see this, so don't. I'm going to get so much stick.
The greatest second row since Peter O'Mahony was a boy. This fella. I went to the same school as Peter, so that's why I bring Peter up. But like, and he's also a legendary Irish second row.
Let's get him on the podcast.
Get him on, Pete. Come on the pod. He's got free time now since he retired. But yeah, like I think so. Like you and me both love rugby, right? And like I think like there's certain, and I love sport for the sake of. So I used to play first class cricket in Ireland, and I love sport for the stories. You know, I love sport for the drama and the way in which it can inspire you. And my old cricket coach, who sadly passed away now, Dermot Gilton was his name. I call him the Galt. We called him the Galt. It's a whole other story. But like, I suppose the interesting thing is, you know, you have these beautiful moments where you're batting, or if you're on the rugby pitch, right? And you're sort of in a battle, you're in a tussle, and there's beautiful sort of stories, and there's beautiful drama that goes with that. And I think that can be inspiring. And so people can find inspiration from that. They can find inspiration from books. They can find inspiration from films, stage, TV. So for me, the podcast was really just about exploring that idea, because that idea of transcending, having your light shine to the highest way possible, that's so core to me as an actor and as an artist and a creative, inducing that in other people and living that myself. Because and so the podcast was very much focused on me. Well, it was about trying to practice voice acting more, and to try and, you know, work with all of the production that comes with sound design. But also it was about exploring that idea and meeting people to talk about that idea. Sometimes it was just me monologuing about that idea, because I suppose from my perspective, I feel very fortunate that I feel like I have a good handle on what my light is, and I feel I have a good handle on what I can offer to the world. And I really love offering it out, and people receive it well, you know. And the thing I often say is, I wish people could see themselves and the world the way I see them.
Yeah.
because I feel like it's just so beautiful when I see the little bits of magic in the world. And I think podcasts can be great, and any kind of artistic medium can be great for capturing those little moments of magic. Because I really do believe that those are the things that just light people up. So my like absolute idols in terms of acting, people I really look up to, Kieran Ahern, for example, first and foremost, just as a beautiful, wonderful mentor and just a brilliant guy. But then you have people like Daniel Day-Lewis, and Cillian Murphy, and Brad Pitt actually would be another person, in terms of these artists. And because I think they're just wonderful artists in terms of what they forge, but also how deeply they think about art. And Cillian Murphy in particular, I think, is very interesting because Cillian also went to my school, actually. And so Prez is a very interesting place. Just to shout out Prez, it actually quietly, produces a lot of very fascinating characters. And Cillian started acting in Prez, actually, and an interesting guy, because he said something about acting before, which I thought was really interesting. He said like, some days I wake up and I'm like, what do I do with my life? I dress up in like funny clothes and dance for people. Like, what am I doing? And then sometimes, but then he says, but like, it's interesting and it's creative, and people need that escape, right? And then he said, occasionally, sometimes as well, you'll say something that will inspire someone, or you'll do a performance that will inspire someone, and that's really special. And I think that's why I think that's, in many ways, that's one of the reasons that one of the core reasons I do what I do, is that I love the idea of being able to sort of like find a moment of magic with someone and take it to a new level. I think it's really interesting as a species. We have this capacity to sort of like, reach to this really beautiful level and be able to sort of really transcend in whatever we do. People call it flow state, or people call it like moments of magic. And I think it's beautiful whenever we do that. I think it's the best of us, when we do that. And you go back to people like Da Vinci or Ibn Sina, when they're creating these beautiful pieces of work that will last well beyond themselves. I think that's kind of what we're when we're at our best as a species. That's what we're at. And I think for me, so much of it is around the idea of presence. I think so much of it is, it's so much about being right where you are in the moment, and finding that place where, when you are that focused and that present, the room then starts to glow a little bit. And I think that's really interesting. And I've had that experience on stage or on set, where you're sort of really present in a moment of deep emotion. So I did a play yesterday, actually. Was it yesterday? It was 2 days ago. Today's Friday. So it was a couple of days ago. And I remember being on stage and I was speaking to someone, and I was there with my scene partner, and you just get so present, where it was like everything just started to glow for a second, and you could feel really deep emotion coming to the fore. And I think that's where that transcendence comes to. It's just that little bit of magic where you just let everything stop and you just come right into the moment. So I think that is huge, is for people to just, I suppose, if there was a formula to finding that transcendence in whatever you do, whatever entrepreneurial venture you're in, I would say it's, self-compassion. That allows you to find some authenticity. That authenticity allows you to touch into your passion. Through your passion, you can create a vision. Through your vision, you can then set about the creation of that vision, the manifestation of that vision, whatever that is for you in life. But the way you're going to get to that place of transcendence, where you're going to really, with outstretched fingers, touch something higher and create something higher, is through deep, deep presence and immersion. And I think, for me, that's always been the key, and that's where the magic happens.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. You said throughout this conversation about sort of some mentors that have helped you along the way. Is there anything in particular that stands out as a piece of advice that they've given you that's helped you and that's stayed with you throughout your sort of career so far?
It's good, Hugh. It's a good question, Hugo. You should do this for a living. I'm trying to think of something good for you. So one thing that Kieran gave me as a piece, I'll give you two. How about that? One thing that Kieran told me once is I was trying to work out this idea of, so for example, There Will Be Blood, the film by
Yep.
with Daniel Day-Lewis in a starring role. I always thought that was really interesting because Daniel Day-Lewis got to the stage in his career and has gotten to the stage in his career where it's like he's playing a character for sure, but he's also doing this amazing sort of rock opera overlying it, where he's like talking to you about power and what it means to be power. You know, he can tell you this two-layered story. And There Will Be Blood is a good example of that, right? He's playing this really interesting character, but then he's also talking about power and greed and expansion and all those things. So I asked Kieran, I was like, Kieran, how do you do that? Like, how do you tell that two-layered story? Like, do you like try and be cognizant of both of those layers and then step into the character? Or and Kieran said to me, he's like, no, it's actually the opposite. If you can believe it, he said it's actually about finding the character and being deeply present in that character. And when you get so present and you kind of find that character, that's when the two layers or the three layers or whatever many layers will come out. And so I'm quite an immersive actor. And so like I find that the way I tend to approach characters, I find this higher ideal that I'm trying to reach for, this transcendence. And then it's about the aestheticism, like what's the vision of the character. Then it's about embodying their body, their mind, their soul, everything. And then for me, I try and get so immersive that there's only one thread back to me. So I try and get it so that their subconscious, their everything, their psychology. And I think that's where the real magic happens, that deep immersion and that deep presence with the character, where you're so in them that that's where you start telling those other stories, those other layers. Because I think the key is actually that you're not trying to tell those layers come out naturally. Like you look at some interesting characters in history and you almost project out those multiple layers, or you can see those multiple layers coming out, but they're not trying to do it, they're just living. And that I think was huge for me. It's like understanding how you get inside a character really effectively, but also having the courage to go there. Because it can get, I mean, let me tell you, it can get kind of scary. Like there's a character I played recently who was a murderer, and like a very like seductive murderer. And like it was kind of a scary process where you're trying to like get inside the mindset of this person. And it took me a while to kind of shake it off after I finished the role. The other big piece of advice I got from a mentor was the Galt. And the Galt,
Cricket
coach,
Yeah.
the Galt, an elite coach and a great guy. And he was a guy who always just he taught me the courage to be kind. He was one of the kindest men I ever met. And a deeply, he was just led with that kindness. And he was like empowerment leadership style before that was cool. You know, like before that was in all the zeitgeist. He was just so kind and led with such a beautiful heart, but then also had strength and was boundaried when he needed to be. But kind of had so much, just graw more, as we'd say in Irish, just big love, you know what I mean? And it was just beautiful to see. And like, there's a great saying in Irish, it's like, Ní cosní an sé fuac chun a bheith cinálta le duine éigin, which means it doesn't cost anything to be kind to someone. And it's, I found that to be fascinating with the Galt. And he was just a fascinating character. And it was so interesting because he taught me so much about how to lead with your heart and be very kind. And I think that's very important as a creative, because you gotta have passion and you gotta have love. And I think that's very much how I lead forward. And because I think you have to just be big, you know what I mean? And I'm naturally very just big as a person, big energy, big love, big leadership, big just king energy, you know? And for me, I love doing that. I love being that way because it's naturally how I am. But it's finding the balance of being that way, but then also being strong and also having boundaries and also being able to be assertive when you need to be, and encompassing all of that into being a good leader. So he taught me a lot about that. And an interesting story for you, Hugo, is Galt passed around 2021. And when he was sick in hospital, God love him, it was during COVID, so no one could really get into him. And the two doctors that were looking after him towards the end of his...
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
The two doctors that were looking after him towards the end of his life were two lads that he coached. And I remember I've never ever been able to get through the story properly. But the two, I remember we were texting Rory, one of the lads, and we were like, Rory, how's he getting on? And he'd be sort of feeding stuff back to us, like. But I just think that's so beautiful that like he left a legacy of 30 plus years of coaching, and like how amazing is it that like, you know, he was able to circumvent all of the like COVID essentially, and all of the restrictions, that the love that he put out and the kindness that he put out and the leadership he put out helped forge all of us in so many ways, but helped forge these two men to be wonderful doctors to then be able to be with him towards the end. And I think that says something about kindness, and I think it says something about if you're, you know, leading with love and leading with strength as an entrepreneur, but as a person, that it'll find its way back to you.
Yeah.
You know,
Come back around.
exactly that. Yeah.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much, Dr. Ali Khan.
Thank you, Hugo. The pleasure's been all mine.
Thank you. Well, that was a fantastic episode with Dr. Ali Khan. I really found his story really interesting, particularly from sort of Cork in Ireland, and he's sort of dotted between Ireland and the UK. He's really experienced in education, and he's got some really good stories, really from, you know, being a business owner as a surgeon, and then all the way through to, you know, building that structure around his life so that he can fulfill his passion as an actor now. And I wish him all the best moving forward. This has been GraftCast. You can watch some of the older episodes here. Give Jack some work to do. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us.